Thanks so much. We're 43 days until the November election, and there are big questions remaining about the future of our country. What's going to happen to your tax cuts? What would really happen if Republicans take over? And what's the Democratic strategy going forward? Joining us live to talk about all that and more is Democratic Congresswoman Susan Davis from the 53rd District. Congresswoman,
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Good
We appreciate
to be
it.
with you.
Let's talk about the Bush tax cuts. That was the big story of this week. President Obama wants to keep the tax cuts except for those at the top 2%, those making over $250,000. Republicans say that's not good enough, we want everybody. And then late this week, some Democrats said, well, we agree with the Republican position. Where do you stand?
Well, I'm really focused on middle-class prosperity. I do believe that we need to extend the tax cuts for the middle class. I mean, 96, 97, even 98% of the population in most of our states, and that's significant. So we don't think that you should hold that hostage to give tax breaks to the wealthiest 2%.
The Republican argument, though, is that the top 2% are the job creators, and why do this in the middle of a recession? Wait for a couple years. What do you say?
Well, I think the reality is that first we need to focus on the middle class prosperity, because that's where the needs really are. And within the group of people who consider themselves small business owners, most of small business owners are not going to be affected by this. I'm certainly looking at the information because I've had some ideas about why if we take that 250,000 and perhaps we use an inflationary figure, which would certainly bring it higher than that. But by and large, we really are talking about people who don't necessarily get their income through their work. I mean, there are investment dollars that are part of that, and quite frankly, they've done okay. We know that there's been great disparities, and we want to try and address those. I think it's great for the people who are earning those dollars, but I certainly have people that even come from me, from the district, and say, you know what, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But it's other folks who are not.
One group that is not doing okay, the poverty in America. We got new numbers this week that show that there are 43 million people living below the poverty line. That's about $10,000 a year that they're earning. 1 in 5 children living below the poverty line. What should we do about that? Well,
I'm actually going to be out on the street looking at this issue in San Diego this evening and this morning because I think we want to know more about the homeless here in San Diego. And we know that 1 in 7 figure that's just come out, and it's striking. It's very unsettling, because a lot of those people, I think, have worked hard and frankly played by the rules, and for circumstances far beyond their control find themselves in that position now. But we want to know more about them, and particularly I'm a former social worker, so I really do care, you know, what's happening to those children, what kind of lives can they anticipate, and what is that going to do for them as they think about who they are and who they want to be. We have some wonderful programs for children in San Diego, educating them, whether they're living in cars or wherever they're living. But I think it's very important for us to really understand this problem better, and we obviously want to do a lot about it.
And when some people hear new programs, they start to shriek a little bit because they think that means big government. Everybody and their families have had to cut back during this recession, yet the size of government has grown in a lot of ways. What programs would you like to see cut?
Well, I think first off, I remain very concerned about the downturn in the economy. I think that's something that we're all very focused on. But the reality is that we have really started to turn that corner. It's not enough, not nearly enough for what we want to see, but there are more people who are being employed. Some of the programs that we've certainly in San Diego have employed people that had been out of jobs for some time, but we need to address that. Certainly the unemployment compensation, I think, is probably the one program that we need to make certain that continues, because otherwise, people really would be down and out. There are a lot of ways that we can create better efficiencies. We know that, and we're working on those. And we're actually seeing
any specifics, though?
Across the board, I think that the efficiencies, cutting out some of the bureaucracies, doing away with duplication, that's always something that's important. And we're doing that on defense. In the defense budget, we're looking at a number of programs that don't hurt the men and women who are serving. I think it's very important that we focus on them. I'm anxious that the Senate gets out the authorization coming up, hopefully next week. And I'm concerned about our families and how they're doing.
And Secretary Gates, who is a Republican, has been leading that effort, hoping to do it in a bipartisan way. But that takes us to our next topic, which is the November election. It seems like a lot of the buzz is that the Republicans might take over the House and may even take over the Senate. What happens if that happens? What does that specifically mean for this country, and do you think it's going to happen?
Well, actually, I think our Republicans have been pretty clear about what's going to happen. I think they've said we want to go back to the way things were. We want to go back basically to Bush-era politics, and that's just not acceptable. I think that we're moving forward, and we need to continue to do that.
If that happens, then, what is the Democratic response? Because the Republican response on basically everything that the Democrats have tried to do is to say no, and to vote uniformly no. Will the Democrats stand up and essentially try to filibuster everything the Republicans try to do?
Well, I think that hasn't necessarily been the strategy. Right now, I don't think anybody's going that far ahead in their thinking, because quite honestly, I have a lot of colleagues that are in some very, very tough seats, and I think that they're working very, very hard, and they're getting their message out, because if we go back, that means that we will reject and rescind a lot of things that have happened over the last few years. And despite the fact that we've had just an incredibly tough time, and a lot of that, of course, occurred prior to this administration, we nevertheless, I think, can move forward.
But let's talk about getting that message out, because the Democrats have really accomplished a lot during this time. Yes, not universal health care, but major health care reform, which has evaded them for decades, major financial reform, changes on energy. Why hasn't that paid off at the ballot box? I mean, why aren't more people giving Democrats credit for that?
I think that when the economy is as bad as it's been, it's very hard for people to get much beyond that. It really is. I know, again, going back
to... And who's to blame? But then who's to blame for that?
Well, I think that the fact that it's been difficult to get through that message, we understand that people are hurting, and that when you're hurting, we know that even in families, you know, when finances are the center of attention in a family, you know, it causes a lot of discord, and that makes it tough to get through that. Democrats have had to compete with that. Honestly, we know that we have to do more in that area, but on the other hand, it's been very tough because we had such a deep hole to get out of.
And let's talk about one more issue that you've been very, very active on. One of the leaders in Congress is, we're talking about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Going before the Senate this week, we heard that a judge basically said that the policy is unconstitutional recently. Where is that at, and when is that going to go away, in your view?
Well, there's a provision in the Defense Authorization Bill that basically says that as the Defense Department completes all of their work, that then the Secretary has the opportunity to look at that information and to move forward. And I'm hoping that that's going to happen. I think that we know that there are men and women throughout this country who want to serve openly in the military. And most of the people, I think, from San Diego and that I talk to whenever I go into the war theater, believe that it's kind of a non-issue anymore. And so I'm hoping that the Senate, as they look at that authorization, will be able to move forward. There's good language in the bill, I think, that gives the Secretary some room to move with that.
Okay, so I guess final question, what happens in November?
I think your guess is as good as mine, really. But I think that the Democrats are going to, I actually think they're probably going to hold on to the House, and I think they're definitely going to hold on to the Senate.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. And last time you were here, you just had a new grandchild. So how's that going?
Yes, I did. He's wonderful.
All right. Well, congratulations. Great to have you here, and hope you come back again.
Thank you.
To find out how to get in contact with the Congresswoman and share your views with her, you can go to sandiego6.com and click on our link, Hot Topics. And for election information 24/7, go to sandiego6.com and click on the Vote 2010 tab on the left-hand side of the page.